very humbling, right? To get the opportunity. It's not easy to, especially a family-owned business, to kind of gain that trust. But then, more importantly, it's exciting, right? I'm a person that gets out of bed just running, and I think it's just very exciting for the opportunity.
Marty, what day is it? Wednesday? It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Jack Crumley. This is Marty Kuhn. Marty Kuhn is the new CEO of Mike Albert Fleet Solutions. That is a company that has been going in this area out of Evendale's, the home office.
That's correct.
You guys have been going for decades. Started out, Mike Albert was one of the first used car companies here in town, period. And that was back in the 50s.
Yeah.
It's been almost 100 years
That's
on the
right.
car dealership. Pivoted into the fleet business in the 50s. What is it like being the new guy in the driver's seat of a company that's been going for that long?
It's fun. It's real fun.
Is it?
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, the business was originally suscepted in 1927, actually, where the Jack's Casino, or the new casino, is located, and it kind of morphed into about 1957 when Bob Bettigal, who is our chairman of the board, who will be 98 here next month,
right.
Started the leasing aspect. So we're going on a 60-plus year anniversary for that and a 100-year anniversary for the company's history here in Cincinnati.
Which is really tremendous work, given the fact that you guys are a family-owned, long-running company that is competing, a top 10 national fleet company.
Right.
You guys are doing national work, and it's still a family-owned local outfit.
That's right. I was actually just talking to one of your coworkers in the hallway. Yeah, we're a national player. We have close to about 100,000 vehicles, inclusive of services, across the United States. We did incept here in Cincinnati, but a lot of opportunity to kind of expand and gain market share across the U.S.
In terms of being a national player and working with different companies to supply a number of different vehicle solution things, does the idea that Cincinnati has so many big companies that are headquartered here, does that help with the conversation? Well,
I think it does. I mean, first and foremost, I don't want anybody in our backyard.
Sure.
Right. So for local businesses that aren't doing business with Mike Albert, that's a good way to kind of get me fired up, because we are rooted here. We still believe the customer service and kind of human element is a mastery of our art. And candidly, I think it kind of gives us a leg up when you look at us being a pretty astute Midwest city. I feel like we kind of box above our weight class, if you will. I do feel like that propels us into winning some deals compared to our competitors.
Right on. And so in terms of what the process actually is and the variety of services that you guys have,
sure.
I think it's more than, I think people would maybe be surprised to hear that it's more than just we can supply a fleet of vehicles for your team to go out and be representative of. You guys have a whole variety of stuff. What is the process as far as clients?
I mean, we have a plethora of different services, but to start with your initial question, I mean, the process is long. It can take almost a year sometimes to win the business, and I think it's a lot more complex than people believe. It's not just deploying capital, and you brought up services, which we'll get to in a second. You know, you really just need to slow down and kind of listen, because not every business is created equally. Right. And in fact, some people may care more about safety, right? When you think about how fast an individual's driving, maybe they haven't performed preventative maintenance. That may be a higher priority than other businesses that say, hey, I'm a startup and I just can't afford the capital outlay. I need you guys to be kind of lenient from a lease perspective. So there's a very wide range of conversations that have to happen, and more importantly, a lot of listening, because at the end of the day, you really kind of need to get it right. And not every client's created equally. We're kind of vertical agnostic. I mean, we do everything from pest control to banks to dry cleaners to HVAC, and the vehicle size and the construct doesn't necessarily matter to us. It's all about how do you generate the most money if you're the client in that vehicle per day. Right? So the way Mike Albert kind of looks at it is from a utilization perspective. So think about manufacturing. You wouldn't bring hundreds of people into your facility to manufacture something at 50% productivity. And candidly, I would say 90% of the time, most of our clients during the initial conversations don't think about it in that capacity, which is why it typically takes about a year for that process, because some of the more astute and kind of financial forward individuals, they would treat it as what I would call unit economics. So making sure that if I'm going to spend X number of dollars on a monthly basis, I have to generate Y from a revenue perspective on a daily basis. So I'm a math nerd by trade, so I think about things like that. And sometimes it's interesting because we have many situations where we'll have a client come into us and produce a number that they think they need, and I would say 100% of the time it's usually a number a lot less than that. And it's very hard to pass up doing a relationship to us when you can build that type of rapport and that trust where, hey, I need 100 vehicles. We've actually ran the analysis. You really only need 80 vehicles.
Yeah.
And if you run them at 85% efficiency, you can save X millions of dollars.
Do you get to see the look on people's faces when you say, actually, I think you need less?
We do. I'm going to be very careful and not talk about particular clients, but we had a business that's across the river from us, I'll say that, recently, who's with one of our competitors, and they came in, it was a 30-minute meeting. They stayed in the offices for 8 hours, and by the end of that day, not only were we able to help them with some of their breakage clause within their contracts, we were able to save them millions of dollars, basically just on the way they were positioning vehicles, the way they were utilizing vehicles, and then bolting on some of those services that you referenced earlier.
Is that something you guys run into a lot because you are playing on, on the national level and dealing with companies that aren't here and maybe have different connections with other companies? How often are you able to bring a lower number and a more rewarding number to these prospective clients versus what they're dealing with in your competitors?
That's a great question. I would say the majority of the time, but it doesn't necessarily get noticed immediately because you typically have to bolt on services to be able to accumulate enough data to produce analytics. So I'll give you a quick example. An individual may come in, and some of these are rounding errors, $4 or $5 per vehicle, but you get a product, maybe it's called managed maintenance, right? We only hire people that have spent 20 plus years as an ASE certified technician to manage on your behalf. So if you're an employee of Tire Discounters and you're driving around one of their vehicles, you don't really have the time to negotiate with somebody on whether or not you need a new air filter or air pump or gas pump, those types of things. So initially out of the gate, what we'll do is we'll either bolt those components on to be able to develop the construct of the data to get enough information to provide that analytics, or we'll give it away for 6 months because we believe that that'll get them to the... Typically, though, COVID really amplified things, and it's interesting because what we're seeing is people are hanging onto vehicles significantly longer.
Yeah, sure.
So you typically don't have a cash reduction, but you have a cost avoidance from a future perspective. So again, after working in finance for many years, right, from a budgeting perspective, you don't kind of want these peaks and valleys of hidden costs and surprises, and we saw a lot of that through COVID. OEM production and supply chain via procurement was really hindered from that. So we saw people taking vehicles that typically have a 4 to 5 year lifespan out to 8 or 9 years.
Stretching.
Then you get into this moment of despair where you do have to have a lot of capital outlay. So our big MO is really trying to get individuals to treat it like it's a financial portfolio. It's typically either the second or third largest item on your balance sheet next to employees.
Wow.
And your capital costs, right? But I would say 95% of the time, no one looks at that in that capacity. They look at it as we need it. It's the cost of doing business, similar to running an audit or things of that nature. But the reality is you should look at it as an earning asset, generating revenue for the company. And if it's sitting idle, that's not good. That's why services have become so prolific, because we've been able to not only do things like manage maintenance and fuel, but we've kind of tipped over into this world of data and technology, which I'm assuming we'll get into in a second.
Well, I was just going to say, so in terms of the evolution of technology, you're working in this industry that's been around now for decades. You are from the finance and technical side of things, which I do want to get into the role that plays in your leadership and what you've learned from things. But as far as the role that technology has played in changing things, it is a lot easier, and we certainly learned this once COVID hit. It's certainly easier to set up a Zoom call.
That's right.
And technology making things more convenient than somebody getting to a car and driving somewhere for a meeting. I know that there's a lot of technology that figures into the maintenance side and the safety side of things for that too. So is it a double-edged sword in terms of opportunity and challenge?
It is. I mean, I think it's like anything. You have to appreciate it and respect it, but there's also a certain amount of fear that has to go along with it. Our focus is obviously continuing to invest in technology. I don't care if you're the largest company in the world or a small startup. Technology usually hinders business because it requires a significant amount of continuous investment, right?
Okay.
And the most important thing with that investment is to get all that data into one consortium. And one of the biggest things that I saw with Mike Albert when I came in is you have 30 or 40 different systems that aren't necessarily talking to each other, right? So when you talk about the need and almost the demand for technology and data, that's been a big focus for us, right? Let's get our data clean so we're providing real information to folks.
Was that a difficult thing for you, sort of being on the outside, coming in, being this CEO from outside of the family, running things? You've got maybe what someone would call a fresh set of eyes on things,
Sure.
and making decisions on what to pursue and what to retire. That may have been easier for you to make that call versus somebody who's been there
Sure.
for a long time?
Well, I definitely think having an objective approach, coming in with fresh eyes was a big difference, right? And I may have kind of looked at it as a little bit more daunting than I think the employees, and in fact, you know, the chief technology officer at the time, you know, but that's what happens when you don't invest in certain technology over the years. I mean, Mike Albert has some really good advancements in some of their applications, and we've obviously rectified the stuff that I noticed when we first came in. But I do feel like my legacy career gave me kind of that lens because I was in fintech, and even though I was, you know, the president and prior to that the CFO, it gave me a really good lens on trying to figure out stability of our systems, because ultimately we were doing something very similar to what Mike Albert does, except we were a short-term leasing function.
And in terms of, you talk about these systems that weren't talking to each other before, finding efficiencies in that.
That's right.
And using technology in the way of safety. I saw you guys had a post on LinkedIn not too
That's right.
terribly long ago about some of the way the technology aids in giving data and helping with safety of these different systems. That's all part of the service plan.
That's right. That's right. You know, and it goes back to the, you know, it's client specific, but we have some clients.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's right. We have some clients that may have 3,000 to 4,000 vehicles. They might not need the financing, but they are adamant, and so is their legal and HR department, that they need mechanisms to be able to track safety. And what I mean by that is, it's not necessarily doing preventative maintenance and changing out tires and things like that. That's definitely an aspect of it. But we have certain clients that want to know where their vehicles are at between 6 and 10 at night when the employees are off duty. We have certain clients that want to know how fast they're going, what certain times of day, where they're located at. In theory, it kind of sounds like Big Brother a little bit, but the reality is this has been in this space and in the insurance industry for, you know, at least a decade now. We're trying to look at it as more of a proactive thing to mitigate risk.
Right.
Insurance companies love that, HR, legal, and compliance love that as well. But again, it comes back to what does the client really need, because not everybody's created equally.
Because you are from fintech and we are talking about technology and the role that it's playing in things, certainly AI has been in the conversation for so many different things. Does that involve removing a people element, or does it help enhance what people are doing?
I think it's the latter. It's going to be an enhancement, and you know, I think probably my number one priority in this role is clarity. Right. So when we talk about AI, our company implemented it 12 to 15 months ago. We've built models, we've built different algorithms inside of it. What I try to make sure that people understand, and that I do try to convey, is I'm not trying to eliminate jobs. This business is growing and we're trying to scale. What we're really trying to do is remove the administrative functions that, quite frankly, most human beings don't want to do. Right. Everything from paying an individual invoice to answering a particular phone call. We don't want to get away from the human element, because that's the legacy of Mike Albert.
Yeah, for sure. And then finding those efficiencies and, you know, again, helping different systems talk to one another. That's all really valuable stuff. And I know that there were some stats about, you know, in your time with the company so far, what is it? Rentals tripled?
The actual service rate has tripled,
Yeah.
right? So when I started, every vehicle that we had about one service component attached on it, but similar to what we were talking about earlier, if you take 3 or 4 services, if you will, think about it as I'm running your credit score, right? For people in the finance space, when you get your credit ran, there's typically 1,500 roughly variables that get ran. You only need about 8 or 10 of those to provide 95% predictability.
Wow.
We've been able to do a lot of research internally and externally across the United States that have identified there's really probably 4 or 5 core services that give us 95% predictability on cycle strategy. We're trying to get the business to a position where I should be able to tell you in 4 years, this is what your vehicle is going to look like. I should be in a position to have an adult conversation with you on cycling out the vehicle, because it's better to sell a vehicle in June than it is May based on production time. So
Sure.
We're really trying to flip the fleet world on its head and become highly analytical without losing the human touch.
That feels like a lot to keep track of, and I'm glad
It
you've
is.
got the technology to do it. We got to take a break. We are going to know more from Marty Kuhn when we get back. History in fintech, the role that all that stuff plays in being the new CEO at Mike Albert Fleet Solutions. We will be back with more Working Lunch after this. Stick around. Welcome back to the Working Lunch. I'm Jack Crumley, joined by Marty Kuhn, who is the new CEO of Mike Albert Fleet Solutions. When I say new, you've been doing this for a little while, right?
I have. I started in November of 2022 as the president.
So what is that like for you? Again, we talked about being fresh eyes and the first member, the first non-Bedigal family member to be in the driver's seat like this. I mean, what is that like? You're stepping into a long-running outfit.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it's very humbling, right, to get the opportunity. It's not easy to, especially a family-owned business, to kind of gain that trust. But then, more importantly, it's exciting, right? I'm a person that gets out of bed just running, and I think it's just very exciting for the opportunity.
Is it a difficult balance of wanting to honor the legacy of this business that has been successful for decades now, and then also wanting to, like you said before, find efficiencies and chart a different path or a new path?
I wouldn't say it's difficult. I'd probably phrase it as it's simple, but it's not easy.
Okay.
There's a lot of legacy that I want to continue forward, right? The level of camaraderie inside the four walls is huge. In fact, the company just won for its 15-year top workplace. So we're one of only 3 companies in Cincinnati that have won the top workplace out of the 17 years that it's been running. So day one, I was like, I got to make sure I don't screw this up, right? So I want to keep that level of camaraderie, but there's a level of sophistication that you and I talked about earlier that has to come through the business, and it's creating a different way to think. It's creating clarity, like we just talked about, and making sure that people understand that things like data, technology, and AI are there to enhance their job and give them opportunity. Is that a tough sell, though, for people trying to get people to have a different way to think? That can be really challenging. It's a very tough sell because, to your point, I package it as I want to take these non-value-added activities and create your job to be more efficient. And I think for some people it's very appealing. So if you're a sales individual and you realize maybe you can have 100 clients versus 50 clients, the earning power is there. But if you're in operations, I think it becomes a little bit more complex. Right on. And also the idea, too, of what got us here won't necessarily get us to where we're trying to be. Well, that's my mantra. That's something I live every day, and I believe as human beings, regardless of where you sit, what your profession is, I genuinely believe human beings can get better every day, and it's my responsibility to not only provide that clarity, but provide the environment, right? So part of it is definitely selling the technology and the growth, but the other part of it is creating those opportunities. We do a really good job of promoting from within. In fact, I would say most of our workforce has been there probably over 20 years. Wow. So that creates a bigger challenge of people that says, hey, I've always done it this way. It takes just a little bit more time in open conversations like the one we're having here. And candidly, you just need to be very honest with folks about what the future holds. Well, especially, again, if you're maybe a newer face and wanting to be as upfront about what your plans are as you can. You went to UC for finance? I went to UC for finance. I didn't graduate from University of Cincinnati. Unfortunately, they did not have a night program, and I had got a gig to start my first job. So I ended up graduating from Wilmington College. So I only had about 30 hours I had to take outside of UC. So what was that job that needed to get more attention? It was my very first job at John Morrell, that company that's up in Springdale owned by Smithfield Foods. I was an entry-level accountant and auditor at the time. So if you ask my wife, she'll say I'm not a UC alum, but I spent 4 years and plenty of money there, so I think I could probably say that. I mean, wearing the red and the colors is at least not that challenging. Right. You spent a number of years then, and you stayed in the finance world doing fintech things, companies like Access and then what was it, CNG acquired CNG them? Holdings. Well, before that I was at the Hillenbrand Group out at Hillrom in an international finance position. That was till about 2011. CNG Holdings is the parent company of what I would call a house of brands. So Access Financial, Tempo, and SmartPay were all brands. They just operated in a different capacity. Some were online, some were retail, some were B2B2C. What about that world attracted you in the first place? Very fast. It was really good being in the finance world, but I wanted a challenge. It was great to work in the public sector, but there's different demands in the public sector than there are, kind of in a privately held business. I think it forced me to think differently. It certainly forced me to exude a level of humility that I didn't have before, because things happen so fast. I mean, these are startup businesses with, I call them kids, but folks in their 20s. I was in my 30s at the time. Everything moves so fast, and one day you have a COO, and the next day you have a brand new COO.
And big dollar swings in between.
And it's huge, right? Very similar to Mike Albert from a leasing perspective, but we did short-term leasing. So you think about your cell phone and the MacBook Pros and different PCs and things of that nature. We had a very large presence at our peak. We were in about 36,000 retail locations across the United States, along with an online presence. But back to your initial point, things would break. We had dozens and dozens of open source APIs, and that connectivity was not necessarily stable because we bought a company that was only doing $2-3 million a year and scaled it so drastically. I think it really forced me to have a wider lens and a better understanding and appreciation for like the entire scope of a business, not just the financial realm.
Now, does that teach patience also? And then when you pivot from that into a more maybe human interactive environment?
Yeah, I think it teaches you a lot of patience.
What was the motivation then for the pivot, doing all this fintech stuff for as long as you did, to going into Mike Albert?
That's a great question. I looked at it as kind of a challenge, right? I had little information on the company. I knew it would be a challenge working with the family, although they're incredible people. It's a very well-established business, but I thought, would there be an opportunity for this place for me to take some of this creativity, build an executive leadership team? We're hiring a ton of data scientists, if you're out there looking, FP&A analysts, and really putting a spin on making decisions that are actually calculated and premeditated versus, reactive. I just felt like it was a business that could use some steroids in it.
And is that something that, that's part of the process in the world that you were in before, having that sort of thoughtful planning and then now injecting it into...
That's right. That's right. Project management is key, right? You got to be very meticulous because there's a lot of moving pieces. The fintech world moved a little bit quicker because of the growth trajectory. A very stable, even though we're growing, a very stable and legacy business like this just takes a little bit longer to move because you have to bring everybody along.
Yeah. So because you've been doing this now for a couple of years and being this guy who's now the CEO of a company that's a still family-run outfit, what insights have you come up with? What advice would you have for a family-owned company here that is maybe considering outside leadership, or someone looking to maybe change industries and get into something that's been long-running and family-oriented?
I think trust. I'd like to think I have a pretty astute moral compass. I think one of the things that got me to this position was being very open with the shareholders. There's several of them, along with the chairman that I mentioned. I think just having a level of camaraderie and talking offline and having open conversations around the good, the bad, the ugly, I think that develops trust. It helps that we're winning. The company continues to grow. In fact, we've set back-to-back annual records in a couple different categories. But I think if you combine that with having these open conversations and building that trust, I think it leads to better things.
Nice. Speaking of better things, what do things look like a year from now?
Well, we're heavily focused on the technology, like we talked about. We're doing a partnership, which I won't mention with who, but we want to accelerate some of the stuff that we've been building in-house, and it's all predictive, right? So when you think about a year from now, I'd like to be in a position where we're your number one trusted advisor, where you're listening to us for advice and positioning around your particular fleet. That trust has to come through empirical data, and like we talked about, that takes time to get some of the defragment systems together. So we feel like we're in a really good place with our data as a fabric construct. Now the next piece is the building of the algorithms, right? The predictive capabilities, and then rolling out the sales program. The change management is probably the most difficult thing because you are dealing with a legacy business, and you talked about it earlier. You might have an individual employee that's been there for 30, 40 years and had the same client. That's not going to happen overnight. So it does take doing these conversations. In fact, one of the things we started a year ago, it's called Grounds for Discussion, Coffee Grounds. And we do it the first Tuesday of every month. I come in a similar environment like this. I pick a senior leader or an executive leader, and we have open conversations, nothing scripted, right? Yeah. I think that's what this organization needs, and we need to continue to have those open door conversations because it's very important. If you're an associate, what's in it for you? Right. What does it mean for you? And there's a lot of good things that come with that. Upgrading talent, creating new promotions, creating new roles for folks. And I think most of the employees have been able to actually see that. And quite frankly, I'm pretty proud of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. You should be. Congratulations on that. I know that Mike Albert Fleet Solutions has involvement with the Bengals as far as a partnership goes. That was a recent post, I think, that was
right.
on LinkedIn there. Congratulations on that. Are there other, you mentioned that there was a partnership that you weren't going to mention right now, but as far as, charity work or community groups that you guys are involved with?
We like to do a lot. We have an employee engagement committee that's comprised of about 10 individuals plus 2 co-chairs, and those 10 individuals have all different walks of life, perspectives, things that they feel passionate about. Listen, at the end of the day, we're fortunate enough to even be sitting here right now.
Yeah, sure.
We like to do things with New Life Furniture, Cincinnati Parks District, and we're not opposed to new ideas for anybody. It's tough. We'd like to do more. We did a lot of stuff with the American Cancer Society last year, and we may be doing something with Blink this year.
Oh, congratulations. That's great.
Yeah. But back to your initial question, we do a lot of stuff. UC is a partner of ours. We'd like to supply vehicles to their coaches and some of their executives, along with they might have some new recruits that are coming in and they want to show them a top-notch experience. Xavier's a partner of ours. NKU is a partner of ours. And the thing with the Bengals is a new 3-year partnership we're excited about. We had an incumbent that we've been trying to get out for about 40 years to get in there to just kind of create that relationship. We have had some individual trade deals with their players, but I think it's a good opportunity for us to partner with somebody that has a pretty good legacy like Mike Albert Fleet Solutions.
And certainly a long-running legacy of the Cincinnati Bengals in this town. That's a fun handshake to bring together.
Yeah.
Marty Kuhn is the CEO of Mike Albert Fleet Solutions. A lot of different options, whether you're talking about vehicles for your business, rentals, sales, service, predictive technology. A lot of different options there that you may not expect. Marty, thanks for coming on the show.
Appreciate you.